Well, good morning, YouTubers. Today I'm going to change out the transfer case on my 2000 Suburban. I'm trying to demonstrate right now for you one of the problems I've noticed. It's a kind of a howling sound that I'm getting right now. If you listen carefully, it almost sounds like the sound of wind against the windshield. I'm not sure if you can perceive that. The problem I had with this, there it is. The problem I had with this case started with difficulty putting it into four-wheel drive. I get a real grinding sound, and so I don't often use four-wheel drive. And then more recently I began having this kind of noise even in two-wheel drive. Okay, you can see this is an automatic shifter for the transfer case. It's a 4L60-E automatic transmission. I've got it in two-wheel drive. Now let's look at what's happening. I'm going to shift it into drive. And I'm going to let the park brake off. Okay, I got the front wheels chocked, the rears with jack stands and a jack underneath. And just listen to what we're getting here. You hear that clicking sound? That seems to be coming from the transfer case. And interestingly enough, even though I'm only in two-wheel drive, the front axle is spinning. It's obviously not putting any torque onto those wheels. I'm told that this GM246 transfer case allows the front axle to spin even when not in four-wheel drive. You see it's got a bit of an axle steel leak right there as well. And then the back axle, I've checked the universal joints out. They seem to be functioning okay. So I don't think this is a universal joint problem. Okay, now I got the vehicle up on 4 jack stands, nice and high, so I can get the transfer case out. Here's our transfer case here, and you can see that the identification tag in this one is missing. It should be right there. And so that's represented a little bit of difficulty for me. I had to pull the RPO codes and identify it that way. This is the drain case. We're going to drain it now, and then we're going to mark our axles front and back so that we put them on in the same direction. Okay, next step, we'll take the skid plate off. Okay, this is the rear. These are 7/16 bolts here. Do it carefully. Let's see how it pries back nicely like that. Okay, now I've got both propeller shafts taken out, the long one's the rear, front is the smaller one, and I've put duct tape over the universal joints so the caps don't accidentally fall off. Next step, take the negative lead off the battery. Okay, next step, the electrical connectors. You pry here and here, and then there's a tab at the top. You pull it back, and then the whole thing comes undone like that. This tab at the top, and then these two wings here. Okay, we're still on the left side of the vehicle. There's another one here, and this one just has a little tab. Just pull that out right there. Okay, now we're on the right hand side of the vehicle. There's another one. Pry up on that tab. Okay, we're on the left side of the vehicle again. The next is the wiring for the encoder motor, which starts here and dips up, and you got a harness that's held with a quick tie up top, so you cut the quick tie and you end up with this apparatus. Now there's a little tab right in there. You pry that back with a little screwdriver, and then the whole thing comes apart. Okay, so we're back on the left side of the vehicle. To the left is the front. This is the output shaft for the four-wheel drive, and I'm going to show you the vent tube. This is the vent tube right here. See that? So I'm going to try and take that off. Now, it's on there pretty tight and I don't want to strain the plastic, so it looks like there's quite a bit of slack in the vent tube. So I'm going to cut it, and then when I get the transfer case out, I'll be able to cut the remainder off and then I'll slide it back on when the new one's back in there. Okay, now we're going to do the 6 nuts that hold the transfer case to the transmission. These are 15 millimeter nuts, and they seem to come off so fairly easily so far. We'll see. Okay, now I've got the 6 nuts taken off that connect the transfer case to the transmission, and you can see I'm dripping oil that turns out to be transmission oil. I didn't drain the transmission oil before I did this, so I'm wondering if I should have done that. In any case, to get those nuts off, you want one of these wrenches here. This is a 15 millimeter, and this was very useful for me to get that nut off, the one at the very top, 15 millimeter. Okay, I've got my transmission jack in place. I'm just inching that out. You can see, here's where we're at here. Okay, so I've slid it back this way, and now I've turned it looking from underneath counterclockwise. I've made some progress here. You can see here's the end there. So I'm going to just try and lower this down. I don't think there's enough room to take it straight down, so we have to rotate it, hopefully without dropping it. So it looks like I've forgotten to undo a vent tube and electrical connector. Tube's off. I thought I had all the electrical connectors off, but I missed this one. Okay, so here's the transfer case up on a bench. This is the rear. This is the fill port and the drain port for the transfer fluid. And normally there's a metal tag that's riveted on here, but we don't have a tag on this one. It must have fallen off. In its place, up here is a printout as to the model. It's a GM246. I think the gear ratio is 2.72. This is the rear output shaft, and it's got splines that are 32 splines for the whole circle. And so if you substitute a different transfer case, you're going to have problems matching up the propeller shaft. On the front, this is the input shaft here, and this one has 27 splines for the circle. And this is the output shaft for the front wheels. And I want you to listen to what's happening here. Isn't that the sound that we heard? And it should be on two-wheel, and yet here we are. Major problems in this. Okay, there's lots of add-ons to this. This is the encoder motor, and it's got 2 electrical connectors here and then here. And this is the vent tube. I cut it off so we can get it off. We've got 2 propeller shaft speed sensors. This is the front propeller shaft speed sensor here. And we have one here, which is a rear propeller shaft speed sensor. And this is the vehicle speed sensor here. And you notice that as I was taking it out, there were 2 devices I failed to unhook. One was a vent tube that I think goes to the automatic transmission. It went forward, and I forgot to unhook that there. And then I didn't notice this vehicle speed sensor back here, and so if I were to do this again, I'd make sure those two are unhooked before I lowered the transfer case to the ground. Okay, so what I've done next is I've basically taken all the sensors off and I've bagged them and itemized them as to what I'm dealing with. And I got to do the encoder motor next. It'll be these 3 bolts here, and then the encoder motor will pull off with careful attention to the seal. What we have here is we've got a little rubber grommet. You take that off, and if you look closely, you can see there's a snap ring in there. And I think to take the 2 halves of the housing apart, I need to slide off that snap ring as I pull the housing apart. And so we're going to take this apart a little bit further and see what we come out with. And I'm still thinking I'm going to end up having to buy a rebuilt transfer case, but we'll see what we come out with this. So here's a snap ring from the inside, what it looks like. It's a giant. I'm not sure if you can appreciate the pitting where this bearing's been rubbing on the inner race of the bearing. It's all pitted. And these individual balls, some of them have got little dents in them. So this bearing obviously is bad. The chain looks surprisingly good. I thought it would be a real problem, but I've been a bit loose, but it looks pretty good otherwise. There's the oil pickup filter, and there's my magnet. A lot of grunge on that magnet, but not more than I typically see with an automatic transmission. Okay, the transfer case is back from a partial rebuild at the shop. Now all I have to do is to put back in my peripherals, speed sensors and so forth, and put it back into the vehicle. Remember to fill it with oil and we'll be good to go. Okay, I've got a stainless steel worker clamp here. I think you could probably use those plastic quick ties just as well, but I happen to have the clamp, so I'm going to use it. And then this is the vent hose, and it's got these little plastic hooks on the back, so it's easy to explain why there'd be difficulty getting it out. I took it out after I had the case open, but I'm going to put it back in again now. So these plastic ties just pop in like that. There's a new O-ring on there as well. Okay, here we are under the vehicle looking forward, and the transfer case is out. I've got all these wires dangling. I'll just identify them. This is the front prop shaft sensor, the speed sensor for the four-wheel drive, the front wheels. This goes to the encoder motor, and then this harness here hooks onto the encoder motor wiring as well. This is the vehicle speed sensor here, and then this is the rear prop shaft speed sensor. And now this tube dangling down here, I think this is the vent tube for the automatic transmission. It was just sitting on top of the transfer case. And then this is the vent tube for the transfer case. And in behind here we've got this clamp up here that holds it all together. And my 6 nuts hook in here. So I'm going to clean off all of this appropriately, and then we're going to throw the transfer case back together. Okay, we're done. Of course, the commonest embarrassing mistake in most aspects of life is the oversight, and this is no exception. Don't forget to put oil in it. Okay, we're all done. The transfer case is back in place, the 4-wheel drive works, and that humming sound is gone as well. There's no more grinding, no grinding in the 4-wheel drive, so we're done. Now you probably realize that I skipped over the most difficult part, and that's lifting that transfer case back into place. And of course I didn't have someone else helping me videotape it, I was doing it alone. I used 4 jack stands, and I was limited by my tools. These little jack stands are just not enough. They weren't getting the vehicle high enough. Compounding the issue is that my transfer case, my transmission jack stand won't go low enough to allow me to slide the transfer case directly into the car, so I had a real problem with that. I think if you're going to do this job, you need to have a transmission jack for sure, and it's nice to have the controls that'll tip it into place so you don't have to do a lot of monkeying with the what ends up being about a 100-pound weight teeter-tottering on your knees. Now if you don't have access to a transmission jack, you could try something like this. This is something I used for a different job. It's a plain jack with a hole drilled in the surface, and I can screw that in and rotate it. If you're jacking up a transmission, of course, it'd have to be a lot smaller. You could use that, but you wouldn't have access to the fine-tuning features that you have with a proper transmission jack. So this discussion is, of course, not complete until the author points out how he'd do things differently if he had to do it again. This is the first time I've taken a transfer case off and put it back on. I think I pretty much would have done it exactly the same way. The only difference would be that it was pretty easy to take that encoder motor off. And the encoder motor has got a plastic housing, and when the transmission jack lifts up on the transfer case, there's a tendency for it to bind on the plastic housing the encoder motor, and the last thing I wanted to do was to damage that device. And so it's actually quite easy to take the encoder motor on and off while the transfer case is on the vehicle. So I would have taken the encoder motor off first, of course after the front axle is off. And then I would have done my rebuild or repair. I would have put the transfer case back on without the encoder motor, and then at the very end I'd put the encoder motor back on. And I think that likely would have led to a little bit less anxiety about damaging the encoder motor as the transfer case is lifted into place. Okay, so there's one other issue, and that pertains to cost. And of course, costs are all over the map with these transfer case repairs. The first thing I did is I actually went to the dealer, and the dealer quoted me $2,000 for a rebuilt transfer case with no core refund and labor not included. And I thought that was pretty high. I went onto the internet and found an American dealer who would sell me the GM246 transfer case for just a bit over $1,000 US. But the problem is that when you're talking about a group that are a long ways away, you have to remember that you have to pay for transportation. And it would be transportation not just for the device but also the core, so doubling transportation on a package that's about 100 pounds. I decided not to do that. Fortunately, there was a group locally who came to the rescue, and I first found a quote over the internet for $1,400 for a rebuilt case. I got a call from a local dealer who phoned me and said, hey, bring the transfer case in, we'll have a look at it. And so I took it off, I brought it into the mechanic. We pulled it apart together, and he quoted me a cost for seals and gears of about $350. And then I was left with a dilemma. Do I try and do it myself, which I much would have preferred to do, or do I let them do the more critical aspect? And the last thing I didn't want to do was to end up messing up or having to take it off later. And this vehicle needs to be completely operational for a long trip in about 3 weeks' time. And so I made the
I guess you could say, the wimpified decision to let a professional do the rebuild. If I had to do it again, I'd probably try and do the rebuild myself. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I appreciate your subscriptions.